Hi, David Schmidt. Welcome back to the QVC podcast. Pleasure to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me back. It's a pleasure.
So the last time we spoke, we went into a lot of detail on all of your fascinating experiences that you had as an inventor before you founded the LifeWave company. You, as a biology undergrad, you were in a lab looking at cancer cells and having some quite remarkable breakthroughs. Then you went on to work for the military and designed a small machine that could create oxygen in submarines. And then the military was like, who is this guy? And they scooped you up and brought you into some even more top secret, high level situations to work on certain types of technology, which to my understanding allowed you to explore ideas that then led to the creation of the patches. But what I really wanted to ask you is, and I know it's been a while, but based on your experiences working with the sort of secret side of government technology, how much crazy stuff is there that we don't know about?
It's insane. The world of at least the U.S. military, I can't speak for other governments, but it's much more advanced than what most people realize. There are technologies that are so secret that they never get released. And then there's things that could be out and be operational for 20, 30 years. And then they finally make it into the public domain because that technology becomes antiquated, and they replace it with something else. But even back in the 90s, they had something like the holodeck from Star Trek, The Next Generation, and they would use this to train people on how to use the controls in a sub. So before they would ever put people inside a submarine, they take them into their holodeck and they can simulate, what it's like to operate the various stations within a nuclear sub. So that's what they were using back then for their training.
This was in the 90s.
That was in the 90s. And of course, today it's way more advanced, although I haven't been privy to that because I'm out of that world. But that was back in the 90s. And then the things that are out in the field that I would say that the everyday soldier has access to is fairly public and pedestrian type of technology. And I think what many people would be surprised about is that when you go into a nuclear sub, there's technology there that looks like it's ancient. That the reason why they use it is because it doesn't fail, and it's extremely reliable, and it's not susceptible to things like electromagnetic pulses. So that they take technology, and if it works for that environment, they use it. It doesn't matter how old it is. And then there's other things that, of course, are like from Star Trek. So I would describe it that way.
Dr. Gundry, can
age spots be removed? Absolutely. A common mistake is thinking that you can remove them.
Okay, so there really is this sort of parallel world of very, very advanced technology happening behind the scenes.
I'm going to put it to you this way. There has been, and I'm only going to say this because much of it is public now. If we use something like Iron Dome, what is over in Israel, one of my business partners worked on electromagnetic railguns. Okay. And the United States, what was made public for many years, for decades, was that we had these threats from North Korea, from Russia on ICBMs. And, we didn't have any defense for it. And of course, President Reagan had said, well, we want to create this Star Wars system to protect the United States from missile attacks. When he was making that speech, that system was already operational and was capable of shooting down 3,000 missiles per minute. I met the inventor who developed technology for detecting missile launches. And we could detect, we used a special technology. I can't say how it works, but he developed a technology for detecting when missiles would leave their silos. So we didn't have to rely on satellites to do the imagery. Once the missile was up in orbit and all that, we could actually know when the missile was coming out of its silo from North Korea, China, Russia, or what have you. So this system is extremely sophisticated. There's multiple layers to it. And the first version of it was in place in the 80s, but it's way, way more sophisticated today than it was back then. But of course, the threats evolve.
Right. When the politician is out in front of the public saying, we need to invent this, or we need to create this, or here's the vision of what we're going to need, he's in this situation and likely others talking about things that already exist. And that's just him signaling that they're going to be public now? Sort of?
They may not know. I mean, one of the things that the government does incredibly well is compartmentalize. And this is to protect national secrets. So if you go to a company like Newport News Shipbuilding, that's the company that builds our aircraft carriers. Mm-hmm. They could have at any time 20,000, 30,000 employees. So how do you develop something secret without it getting out into the public? So what they do is they compartmentalize, and they'll say, well, this group is working on this one system, and that's all you see. And this other group is working on this system, and that's all you see. And in a company of that size, you may only have 6, 8, 10 people that see the entire picture. And the other people that work on the project, they don't get to see the entire thing. So that system has worked extremely well at being able to protect some of these secret projects. So in many cases, they could be asking for funding on something, and it could be going to that project, but it's to advance the project. It's not necessarily to do some of the things that they're talking about publicly. And it's a good thing, because we do want to protect our secrets from our adversaries. So it's not a conspiracy theory. It's something that's very good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was my next question is, the rationale behind it. And it is because it's ideally in the best interests of the world for the United States to have these things.
I'm very anti-war, and yeah. I would love to live in a world where there was no war. And I think, that day will eventually come, either through the second coming or when people come to their senses. I don't know. But I, the practical side of things of where we are today is that the only way that governments can maintain peace is through strength. The only way that we can avoid war is through strength. And so the best way we can have strength is by not letting our enemies know what exactly it is that we have, because it's very difficult to defend against something if you don't know that it exists. And I happen to think that's probably a pretty good strategy.
Avez-vous déjà entendu parler de ce médecin de la NASA qui a dévoilé une astuce cérébrale de 7 secondes qui vous rend super intelligent?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I would prefer the government of the U.S. than I think of a lot of other regimes in the world, where the United States ideally is living into the principles of its founding and wanting to keep the world free and safe for everybody. That's what I choose to believe. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's the future I'd like to live into.
Yeah. And, there are some areas where I would say where that strategy doesn't work. And that would be something like in the pharmaceutical industry. where you and I both know that they've actively worked to suppress technologies that can save people's lives. And, hopefully now with RFK being appointed into FDA, that he's going to champion the natural products industry, like he said he will. And we'll see a little bit more transparency and a little bit more freedom, medical freedoms.
Well, that was exactly my next question, because in matters of national security, I can understand the need for secrecy. But, I've researched, and I know for sure most people listening to this podcast have researched many different technologies and approaches that were very effective. I'm thinking specifically of like the Rife technology, and there was a consensus in my memory of doing this research, there was a consensus among scientists that this sort of frequency medicine was highly effective, especially with cancer, and it just sort of disappeared, and all the people who supported it got very quiet, and it kind of went away. And, you just mentioned the same thing, whenever there's like a real viable alternative to a pharmaceutical product, that same thing tends to happen. So I'm delighted to hear you talk about RFK, who at the time of this interview, it's less than 24 hours since he was sworn in. I watched it live on YouTube crying and crying because it was just such a timeline shift from where we were just even 6 months ago to see him. Sorry.
It's incredible. It's so incredible. And we may finally see some of the technologies that we've talked about, not even complicated things, medical ozone therapy. Maybe we'll see that being pushed up to the forefront now, where more people can have access to it. And we can actually claim that it does what we know it does, that it's an extraordinarily powerful antiviral, anti-cancer, antibacterial therapy. It would be amazing if we could integrate that into every hospital in the United States and use it as a first line of defense against some of the things that we have to deal with. There's no need for people to suffer with cancer and diabetes and heart disease. We know that there's natural treatments for all of these things. So I'm equally as excited about his appointment.
Yes, no, I feel like we've shifted into a timeline that felt impossible. And now, the world is filled with infinite possibility at any given moment, and you just never know what's going to happen. So, yeah. And so when I think about how you chose to employ your, considerable intellect and genius in terms of inventing. So a lot of these therapies that were pushed away were treating. And you have created something that works very well preventatively. So ideally, we would reduce the number of people who will end up needing pharmaceuticals or end up in a severe health crisis. And I just wanted to hear you speak about your vision for that and what, if we're laying out possible worlds and possible timelines, I'd love to hear your vision for what it would look like if everybody had access to what they needed to stay healthy and to have the vitality to live out their highest destiny.
So I think the first thing I'd say, I appreciate the very kind comments, but I do believe that I get my information through prayer. So I do want to honor God the Father with all the blessings that I've had in my life, because I really wouldn't be where I am today without God. And so I do want to acknowledge that. So in terms of, what could the future potentially look like? One we first start with the premise that our bodies are controlled by light and they're controlled by energy fields. And this is nothing mystical. I'm speaking in scientific terms. So we can measure the release of photons from the DNA, from cells. And these are highly coherent pulses of light that initiate many thousands of different biochemical reactions within the cell. We know that the cell, it functions as a capacitor. It stores energy, and we have an electrical charge around the cell membrane. The DNA is a helical coil. In electronics, we would call that an inductor. And so it's capable of storing an electromagnetic field. And that field collapses through cell division, and the electromagnetic pulse.
Do you know what eating cabbage can do to your heart?
Cabbage is a cruciferous vegetable that resembles lettuce and can be red.
That's produced is passed over to the next cell, and that's used to define how that new cell is going to express its genes, either in a younger or an older state. Of course, we have a nervous system that conducts electrical energy, and that produces magnetic fields at right angles. We have a meridian system, which is composed of very fine threads of collagen that have electrolytes attached to them, and these fibers conduct infrared energy. So our body has a fiber optic system that uses light for communications, and that's been documented by a physicist named Joey Jones using functional MRI. So we first start with this basis that our body, we need the biochemistry. So we need a healthy diet. We need nutritional supplements so that we have these raw materials. But ultimately, it's the energy systems of the body controlling the biochemistry. So if we start with that as a foundation, then we say, how can we use energy to improve our health? And what would be the highest way we could improve our health? So this really, to me, comes down to looking at species that have already mastered it and duplicating it. This is a field of science known as biomimetics, where we study living systems and then we try to mimic that with technology that we could apply to human beings. And in this particular case, the species that we have looked at are planaria, which are a flatworm that are immortal. We've looked at hydractinia, which are also immortal and have, both of those species have remarkable regenerative capabilities. We've looked at a species of ant called the temnothorax. And this species of ant, when it's infected by a specific parasite, will alter its gene expression and increase its lifespan by 5 to 6 times above normal. And the biggest discovery that I've made is with lobsters. And I've been able to unravel how lobsters defeat aging and then create technology to apply this to human beings. And as of today, we've just completed 6 independent clinical studies on this technology, and we're seeing remarkable effects. And this all works by introducing light into the human body in an entirely new way for achieving a regenerative effect.
That's incredible. Okay, I'd love to hear more about the lobsters, because when we spoke last time, you mentioned studying the lobsters and the light codes that you discovered in the lobster, which had a incredibly synchronistic connection to your study of gematria and the Bible.
Yes.
And so that work has since progressed. So tell us a little more about what's happening with that particular area of study. And is this a different product, or is it related to the patches, or?
It's all related in the sense that the patches are designed to stimulate the skin with light and cause an increase in a specific peptide in the body. So in the case of the X39, which is our biggest selling product, that one is designed to elevate a peptide called GHKCU copper peptide, and this peptide will reset thousands of genes in the body to a more youthful state. And this has an effect on improving the health of the stem cells, which helps support the overall health and wellness of the body. So with this new technology, I went a step further. And with this technology, it will allow light to be released inside of the body. So now we can stimulate the skin with light, and now we can take light inside the body. And the delivery mechanism for this is water. So what I discovered was that lobsters, looking at spectrophotometry data, well, if we go one step back, in the Bible, after the flood, God is telling Noah, okay, now you can eat the flesh of animals, but do not consume their blood, because that's where the life is. And so I thought, maybe there's something in blood that we've overlooked in the scientific community. Maybe there's something there other than what we think of blood as doing on an obvious level, right, as a mechanism to deliver oxygen into the cells. So I started to look at spectrophotometry data on lobster blood to see what photons of light were being released. And this is where I discovered a biological code. And this code meant that the wavelengths of light that were being emitted in lobster blood were being emitted at a very specific ratio, which actually correlated to music. And so it turned out to be very easy to calculate and predict what the other wavelengths.
When we touch here, maybe just try this, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, that feels nice. Yeah, that's a good. So just do that because it feels comforting. Because when you were
could be. And so I applied this information, and essentially in the early days in these experiments, I would take water, run it through a device that's essentially a fuel cell, but in reverse. And I would take the water and I would electrolyze it and split it into hydrogen and oxygen, subject it to different electromagnetic fields. And light, of course, is a very high frequency electromagnetic field. And then reassemble the water in the presence of those fields using a platinum catalyst. And this produced a new type of water that had never existed before, at least that we know of. But the water was structurally changed where it could contain light. So there were domains within these water crystals that would contain photons of light. So this was exciting because we would know, for example,
this is crazy. This is beyond exciting. Okay. Whoa. All right.
Well, let's say.
So the water is creating light in the body.
The water contains light. So when you drink the water, the light is instantaneously released into the body.
Okay. Wow. So you have encoded the light into the water. We drink the water, the light is released.
The water is, so we have a machine now. And it went from being about 3 feet wide and 9 feet long to now something that's about the size of a very large microwave oven. I would say it's something that you can actually put on a countertop in your home. And you fill it with tap water, and this will goes through 2 separate stages of filtration to remove microplastics and heavy metals and chlorine and all that stuff. And then it goes into the core of the machine, which will process that water with light. So the LED technology that we're using allows light to be embedded in domains between the bonds of the hydrogen and oxygen, so that after it's processed, you drink this water, and now the light is released everywhere inside your body.
Wow. I'm just going to digest that for a second. Okay. And then what happens?
I tell you what, I'm going to skip to the happy ending for a moment and tell you about something that happened in my office last week. We had, we're working on this drone project where we want to provide, we have these drones. This has been 4 years for, and we have cooperative agreement with a number of organizations to provide delivery of medical goods, search and rescue, surveillance over a disaster site, these kind of applications.
Okay. And these are drones that you are developing?
Yes.
Okay. So these are special.
We're 4 years into that. And so
David
part of the
Schmidt
work
made
with
drones, not regular. Okay. Got it. And you're developing them to help serve in these humanitarian ways. Okay.
Yes. And we're also going to be taking, well, that's a different story, but this is a stepping stone to providing clean power for homes. We're going to use the power generation system that we've created for these drones, which is a green technology, and convert them over into power generation systems for people's homes. But that's years into the future. But so these drones are, let's say they're made of fiberglass or carbon fiber, what have you. And I had wanted to hire a fellow in Florida who's an expert on composites to do some of this work. And he said to me, I have to retire. He's in his mid to late 60s. He said, I have to retire. I have crippling arthritis and the pain is so bad that I can't move my hands. And he had gotten into a depression. He had a number of other medical conditions, and he was looking at his life is over. So I said, okay. I said, I know you don't really know who I am, but come into my office and let's talk.
You're like, wow, did you talk to the right person? All right.
Yeah. So he comes into the office and he tells me, his story of the health challenges he has and how his wife has to take care of him now. And he just feels so hopeless and helpless. And I said, okay, this is what I want you to do. Here is a glass of water from a machine that we've invented. So I want you to go ahead and drink this glass of water. I then put an X39 patch on the back of his neck, and I put our Eon patches right up on his hands where the rheumatoid arthritis was. In less than 1 minute, his pain went from a 10 to a 4. And in less than 3 minutes, his pain went from a 10 to a 1. Eventually, the pain was gone completely. And in that 3 minutes, he completely regained the use of his hands with no pain. And his life changed that quickly.
What?
And that's the power of light and introducing light inside the body and introducing light to stimulate the skin. So these are, happy to get into the details of the clinical studies which support why.
Tell them, why should people join us on May 15th?
Well, if you're a person that is not willing to settle.
This was happening so quickly.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
This is truly incredible. And I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge the profound gift, for someone to feel like they had so much to offer the world, but their body was not allowing them to do it. And, our bodies are fighting so many various assaults in our modern environment that this is happening to more and more people at a younger and younger age. And we're losing all of the wisdom and talent and experience they've built up over their life because of these chronic pains and illnesses are incapacitating them right when we need them the most.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that way. I think the exciting thing is that regardless of a person's age, there is still the potential to reverse the aging process and restore health and wellness. And that can come through a variety of different mechanisms. For example, even just out in the public domain with respect to exercise, it's been shown that regardless of age, people can still build muscle, reclaim some strength and stamina, reverse osteoporosis, improve bone density, and just through simple resistance training. There's even, I heard Rhonda Patrick talking about a study that was done showing that and it's going to sound like a lot, but 2 years of a regular intense exercise program can reverse the age of the heart by as much as 20 years. So the human body is absolutely capable of extraordinary things if we provide it with what it needs. And so things like the patches and this water, they're tools. It's all part of the process of having a healthy diet, exercising, getting proper rest, supplementing where needed, trying to have as little stress as possible in your life, and then being able to use these tools to achieve a level of health that wasn't possible before.
Yes. Yes. And I think I love that message, because the message that we get when we go to the doctor is like, this is just what it means to get older. Yeah, this is normal. Yeah. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't.
No. I was coming out of our global conference in October, which was amazing. It was the best event that we had ever had as a company. We had 5,400 people there. It was an incredible celebration. We had the Blues Brothers perform. We had Gwen Stefani and Maroon 5 there to help us celebrate 20 years. And I woke up on Sunday morning and I told my family, I feel like I've accomplished what I wanted to in life. I just had the best event in my life. I can't imagine my life getting any better. So if I went today, just know that I go peacefully. And I shouldn't have said that, because we were going to the airport, heading out for a family vacation, and I was coming around the side of the car, and I didn't realize that the trunk was open, and I hit my head on the metal end of the car, and I dropped to the ground, and I had blood coming out.
Oh, no.
And my son called an ambulance right away, and I thought, oh, all right, well, I kind of got my wish here. I shouldn't have manifested that. And when the ambulance showed up, they said, well, you're fine, but you're going to have a bad scar there. And I said, oh, I'm not really worried.
Like, no, I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I see why you think I will, but I won't.
Yeah. And there's no scar there. So, but we don't have to live within the confines of what traditional medicine tells us, because the body is capable of extraordinary levels of regeneration.
Okay. So I want to ask you something, and then I do want to get into, the details of the clinical trial a little bit. But so when you discovered the light codes through studying the blood of the lobster, when I asked you what you found last time, you framed it as, proof of the existence of God, which really stayed with me. And so what I'm wondering, and this is obviously will be speculation, I don't, expect you to know the answer, but is it possible that what you are being divinely guided to uncover?
C'est la raison pour laquelle j'ai résilié mon abonnement Internet. Et si je vous disais que l'absence de connexion Internet
is something that the human biology at some point in the past was able to do, and it somehow got cut off or taken away? Or is this a new level, do you think, that hasn't, the ability for our bodies to have this sort of reverse aging and healing capacity with the light technology? Is this just us moving into a new field that we haven't existed in before?
It's a fantastic question. And there is a scientific answer to that. And it's that what we have been told about human lifespan is completely incorrect. We were told that people that lived thousands of years ago, or let's say primitive humans, were told that they had a lifespan of maybe 30 years or so. And as medical science has progressed, human lifespan has increased. It's nonsense, and it's not true. I am not knocking medical science because medical doctors, pharmaceutical drugs like different pharmaceutical drugs had definitely saved people's lives. So we're lucky to have modern science. However, looking historically, the truth of the matter is that people's lifespans have been getting progressively shorter. And this is based on looking at the Bible as a historical document rather than just storytelling. It's on the basis that the Bible is indeed the inspired word of God. And if we take it literally, there's an incredible amount to learn. So there was a statistician that did an analysis on genealogies in the Bible and said, okay, I want to take this literally. So let's look at people's lifespans as they're recorded in the Bible. So if you go into the book of Genesis, it will say, well, Adam lived to be 900 and something years old. Methuselah lived to be this age. Noah lived to be this age, and so forth. So it's very well laid out. And so what this statistician did said, okay, I'm going to plug this data into a statistical analysis and see if there's any type of pattern there. And if these are just random numbers, there's not going to be a pattern. But if there is something to how we went from 900-year lifespan down to 120, there should be some type of evidence in that, if in the Bible, if it's true. And as it turns out, what he found was that there was a biological decay curve with this data, and that it wasn't random. And that his hypothesis was that because there was a limited number of human beings on the planet after the flood, that this caused mutations to occur in the DNA, and this slowly decayed the information in the DNA over time, resulting in shorter and shorter lifespans. So why is that important? It means that human beings have the capacity to live to be hundreds of years old. Noah had kids, I think, in his 500s, or built the ark when he was in his 500s, right? There are people in the Bible that didn't have kids until they were over 100 years old. So if we look at that as being true, then what happened and how can we restore that youth? Funny enough, in the story of the tree of life, what I spend some of my time doing is converting, take the King James Bible, convert it back into the original Hebrew, because each letter in Hebrew converts to a number, and then take those words, develop a number, and then see if I can find a code. And there's a code in the story of the tree of life, and it converts over into the frequency 528 hertz. And what's interesting about that frequency is that it converts over into a wavelength of light that's at 385 nanometers. And there's actually 3 different wavelengths. What's important about that is that as you get into the UV band of light, we know that it interacts with DNA. If you go to very short wavelengths, let's say 185 nanometers, that's going to cause terrible breaks in the DNA. But as you get over towards the upper end, closer to visible light, the effect is very different. You have the opportunity to add energy into the DNA. So there is no way that the human author of the book of Genesis, presumably as Moses, would have known
I finally found the dog ramp for large dog owners. This beauty can hold dogs up to 200 pounds.
That number of 528 would convert to a wavelength of light that would influence DNA. And it even goes a step further. That there is data in that story, in those light frequencies or light wavelengths, that show it can trigger regeneration of the telomeres. And what we know about the telomeres, and every species that doesn't age, is the telomeres never shorten. So in the story of the Tree of Life is data that can be converted to numbers, and those numbers reflect a technology that's capable of preventing DNA from changing. So God created a tree that had some kind of food that people would eat that would prevent their body from decaying and to be functionally immortal. That story happens to be true. So today we can uncover that and say, okay, can we apply this to human beings? And when we give people this water, what we see in our clinical studies is that the effect is immediate. You drink the water, and within 15 seconds, we can make measurable observations about changes in the body. We have people connected to heart rate variability through a physio suite. So we see changes in the muscle contractions in the heart. They begin to smooth out. We see a reduction in blood pressure, an improvement in oxygenation in the cells. Most importantly, we see an increase in the energy output in the mitochondria, which is linked to gene expression. We see an increase in collagen synthesis. That's important because the cytoskeleton of the cell, which is made of collagen, is intimately linked to longevity. We see an increase in synthesis of amino acids that is linked to muscle protein synthesis. So leucine and isoleucine and valine, of course, those are the principal ones. And we also see evidence of the KP pathway being upregulated. And this is the pathway that turns on NAD, and NAD triggers an improvement in expression in the sirtuin genes, and the sirtuin genes control longevity. So when you study, as we have, what happens to changes in the urine, the blood, bioelectrically in the body, a pattern of regeneration begins to emerge.
Wow. And these changes were seen like within a minute or two of drinking the water.
So what we do is we have people come into, this is all done independently. We have people come into a clinic and they provide a blood sample and a urine sample. And it depends on which study, because each study we're looking at different parameters. And then we'll take a baseline of different bioelectrical readings. They then get a sample of the water. This would be a 500 ml glass. And then we'll immediately take another blood sample and we'll do dark field and bright field microscopy to see what kind of changes we can record. They provide a urine sample whenever that occurs, and then which we check for metabolism data. But the bioelectrical data is immediate. So they'll be connected to, they'll be sitting in front of an infrared camera. They'll be connected to a physio suite, and those changes start within 15 seconds. So you can actually, and when people drink this water, there is they have the experience of feeling an energy rush up to their head. And on the infrared camera, you can see an improvement in circulation around the head.
Wow, this is extraordinary. And so would this be something that you would drink, if say you had a chronic illness or there were some symptoms you were trying to deal with, once those became alleviated and you were in a state of health, would this be something that you would continue to drink? Or can you drink too much? Would we explode in a ball of light?
The goal, well, it's an interesting point. The goal of the technology is to stop and reverse human aging. And the point that we've gotten to now with the tech is we're finding subtle ways to utilize it where we can, I can talk about this because we have a patent that we filed on it, but we're using biological chromophores to direct the energy to different parts of the body. So I'll give you an example. In the mitochondria that manufactures energy from food, there's a part of the mitochondria is called the electron transport chain. And right towards the end of the chain, there's an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase. And cytochrome C oxidase is a copper-containing enzyme that's a chromophore. And so it is activated by light.
The trade war with China isn't affecting your life as much as waking up 3 times a night to pee.
You would say, or it's sensitive to light. So when people go out in the sun, it's a sunny day down here in Florida where I am. When they go out in the sunlight is being converted over into energy in their cells. What we're doing is we're taking specific chromophores, we're charging them with light using this technique that I've invented. And what we're seeing is the energy of the light goes to a specific part of the body. So what this would mean in practice is, let's say that you had someone with macular degeneration. They could drink a glass of water with a chromophore that was charged with light, and the energy would be released in their eyes. And of course, what many researchers have found, Jerry Tennant is a huge supporter of this. He has a number of books about it, is that when you introduce light into the body, it increases the voltage potential of the tissue, and that induces regeneration. So potentially, we could have light being released into the heart to reverse cardiovascular disease. We could regenerate the liver, the kidneys, all by using chromophores charged with light going to specific parts of the body.
Wow. It's almost like drinking sunlight.
It's a lot like that. It's a lot like that, but it's a little bit more strategic in the sense that when it's sunlight, we're getting everything. And there is 6 different, what we're finding is there's 6 different wavelengths of light that can trigger a regenerative response. So if we look in the literature, it's known that 660 nanometers turns on collagen production, 850 nanometers turns on the mitochondria. These things are known, but we're using this data in a completely different way. And it just happens to be completely consistent with what goes on in lobsters and what's found in the book of Genesis, to embed these photons of light into water. So now we can release that light inside the body so it goes to where it's needed. And it's much more effective than just using an active light source on the surface of the skin.
Yes, because those results are, I mean, I don't really know what words to use for this. It's pretty incredible. And so you're saying there's a short-term future where you could buy this machine and have it in your kitchen.
We began talking about it. I wanted to start talking about it at our 20th anniversary and introduce people to the technology. So we brought 10 of these machines with us, and we took our top 200 brand partners from around the world, and they got to experience this. And it was incredibly fun because you tell somebody you're going to feel something in 15 seconds, and that's a little bit hard to believe. But once they got a chance to drink the water, we got their experiences on camera, and it was pretty amazing. There was a gentleman there who's very skeptical. He is the husband of one of our brand partners, and he drank the water, and he has had a medical condition. He's had a problem with his intestine for about 10 years, and that problem disappeared after drinking one glass of water. So he kept coming back and saying, can I get a glass of water each day that I'm here? Because this problem is gone now. So yeah, we will start to make these machines available around July or so of this year.
Okay. This is just so mind-blowing. It's not, I'm really, truly amazing. I'm a little speechless at how this all works. And I did want to talk a little bit before we wrap up about the patches. I've now been using them for a year. Last time we spoke, I was newer to them.
I was like, Russell, I'm so rich. He's like, you are? I was like, yes. I was like, you're rich.
And in that time, just with my personal experience and the experience of people around me, it is truly astonishing. And I mean, it sounds like the water is taking things to an even next level, but the patches themselves have had truly, I had a friend who she was looking at me and she's like, I know you'd never do Botox, so what is it?
Yeah.
Because I only see her like once a year, and she was like, what are you doing?
What I should say is that X39 is going to continue to be our lead product because it's inexpensive when you think about the effects of it as it compares to stem cell injections. And of course, it's completely safe and you can use it on a daily basis. So the reason to come out with the water machine is that it complements all of our patch products. They absolutely work synergistically together.
Right. And the patch you wear all day or all night, depending which one and what the protocol you're doing is.
Yeah.
So do you have time for one last quick question, or do you need to run?
Absolutely.
Okay. So my LifeWave mentor is Kathleen Horstmeyer. I text her all the time. This is happening. What should I do? What patch should I use? Where should I put it? And she was one of the first people I knew who was using these. Dr. Stillman sent them to us, and I left mine on the shelf, and Kathleen started using hers. And she called me and she said, Meredith, I have to tell you what happened. Like, I can't believe it. Because she had actually used the patches back when the company first started around 2012. And so but not the X39 because that's newer. So she was using this. So Kathleen had been kicked in the stomach by a horse. She nearly died. She was rushed to the ICU. They were able to, stop the internal bleeding, and she survived. But she had a giant, rope-like scar, sort of cutting off her abdomen on the inside. And so because she understands how the bioelectric nature of the body and how it communicates, she really did not like having the scar because she knew it was interrupting the body's processes. So she did all the things. She did supplements and food and red light therapy and manual massage. So she had a ritual where she would massage the scar every morning. Like she would sort of dig around with her fingers and find it and just kind of massage it out. And I think it was about a week after using X39, she went in to do her morning scar tissue massage, and she couldn't find it. She's like, it's not there. So we talk about that story a lot. And now that you're here, I'd love to hear what you think happened.
So scarring is caused by what's called keloid proteins. And this is from an inflammatory effect. So in other words, if we look at what happens during an injury, the human body, of course, is designed to protect itself and regenerate to a degree. But survivability is always the desired outcome. And let's say a person suffers an injury to the abdomen. First, there is going to be a rush of oxidative chemicals. And those we normally think of oxidative chemicals as being something bad, but they're really there to protect us from infection and start to tear down the damaged tissue. So it's part of the healing process. It's when we get oxidative stress chronically when that really becomes a problem. So the oxidative chemicals then signal an inflammatory response. And again, the inflammation is there to help as part of repairing the damaged tissue, tearing down the damaged tissue, now making way so we can make collagen, make proteins to repair the injury. The inflammatory cytokines are signaling molecules for the stem cells. So the stem cells will come in and repair the injury. Now, if there's inflammation that's hanging around, and as we get older, it becomes more and more difficult to control the inflammatory response. There's even a term for it now called inflammaging. As a result of the inflammation, a keloid protein forms, and this is what we know as scarring. And of course, once the scar is there, not much you can do to get rid of it. Well, X39 elevates GHKCU, copper peptide. And copper peptide is extraordinarily powerful. Usually I always think of peptides as being kind of like superheroes, right? So they're superheroes that have very specific power sets. But then you get somebody like Superman. Superman's got all these crazy powers, right? Copper peptide is a little bit like that, is that it has an enormous power set. And its power, what Dr. Lauren Picard found, was that its power set comes from being able to reset thousands of genes back to a more youthful state. So we see the scope of what copper peptide can do as being enormous. It can help to modulate the immune response, help to balance out the inflammatory response, and very importantly, it can trigger mobilization of stem cells through the P63 gene. So essentially what is happening here, and we see this, of course, anecdotally all the time. We don't make medical claims about it, but we see all the time that copper peptide goes in, it regulates.
We had one person significantly change their telomere length within 4 days.